Hi, everybody. I want to thank you guys for attending this webinar today. Dr. Hilton and myself are going to address the how, when, and why of transitioning from being a practicing to a non-practicing dentist. He's going to cover the when and the why. I'm going to go a little bit more into the how of getting out of ownership and what all that entails. I hope you enjoyed his presentation, and I'm going to pass it off.
Thanks, Corey and Rose. I appreciate your invitation to be part of your meeting about speaking about why and when for retiring. And I hope your participants can take home a few nuggets from what I have to say. Please bear with me while I get our PowerPoint and screen share working. I'm hoping you can see that now. My father died in 1979 at the age of 72. He had a heart attack in his office and died several weeks later from complications of bypass surgery. He left his patients and his staff high and dry, and my mother and I certainly in shock. And I ended up getting a temporary license in Connecticut to finish up his cases and sell his practice, which turned out to be just pennies on the dollar. At the time, I said, there's gotta be a better way of ending a career. And Dr. Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I greatly changed the way I looked at retiring when my father died. And so in my 5th year of practice at the age of 34, I developed a different view of practice. Instead of the solo practice that I had started, I envisioned a small group practice of the future. This would allow for transition and the many benefits of small group practice. And at the time, I also asked, well, what is retirement? It's like a long vacation. Many people think that when they go to Florida or Mexico, they have such a great time. They say, I'm going to retire here. This is absolutely perfect. But there's a huge difference between retirement and vacation. Vacation is like an Oreo cookie. The entire treat is a combination of leisure time sandwiched between 2 periods of work. Take the work away, and the value or joy of the vacation is gone, because all you're left with is the filling, just a sweet glob of sugar. Retiring is more like mint chocolate chip ice cream. Small pieces of work are mixed throughout the leisure activities. I continued my journey and started my transition when I took in a partner and sold half my practice in 1996 at the age of 51. Also, as I started cutting back from full-time practice, I began learning how to create that mint chocolate chip ice cream. I mixed work with fun and meaningful activities. I sold the other half of the practice in 2005 at the age of 60. Though I had sold the practice, I didn't fully retire and continued to practice and learn about this retiring journey. At that time, there wasn't much information about retiring, and so I started the Association of Retiring Dentists in 2008 to help learn about what this retiring thing is all about. I found that the when and the why often get mixed up. Why is the most important. When is the result of why a person wants to retire. Why usually determines the when. There are 3 important clarifications we need to make before moving forward. First, money or adequate retirement funds does not equal retirement. Yes, retirement funding is absolutely necessary for retirement. However, a person should not retire just because there is enough money. We need to be thoughtful about what to do in dentistry and what to do in retirement, which could be a third of a person's life. Second, ownership does not equal dentistry. There are plenty of dentists who do not own practices. Their exit strategy is pretty simple. Give their notice and walk away. When we start or buy a practice, this ownership mindset often becomes our identity. It is often paradoxical that the pride of ownership can be a cause for leaving dentistry due to the stresses of management and of running a practice. Third, selling does not mean retirement. Just because you sell a practice does not mean you need to leave dentistry. Selling is merely a way to capture some of the return on your investment. I have lots of friends who have sold their practices and are still in dentistry. They're teaching, they're consulting for insurance companies, for example. It's strange, though, that once a person has financial peace of mind and no ownership or management worries, dentistry suddenly looks pretty good again. So why would a person want to retire? Here are two main categories of why a person would retire. There are extrinsic and intrinsic reasons. The extrinsic are more physical, the intrinsic are more psychological. And within these two categories are whether, as Alan Rodberg said in his book, Life After Dentistry, a person is retiring to something or from something. In many ways, extrinsic reasons are out of our direct control and include declining health, ability, and quality of work. It can be something that happens to a dentist, like an accident, heart attack, cancer. Usually these factors are negative, or reasons to get out of dentistry, retire from our career. When these issues are identified, retirement is usually more urgent and fewer choices are available. Here are some of the symptoms to be looking for, and when found, realize it's best to get out soon. Making mistakes, forgetting important steps of a procedure, failing eyesight, hearing loss that creates communication problems, tremors, failing health, complaints from patients, concerns expressed by staff or colleagues, loss of stamina, fatigue, acute or chronic physical injuries to hands, wrists, neck, back, burnout or inability to deal with stress, changes in mood, anger, short tempers, deteriorating staff relationships, loss of control. Intrinsically, we may love dentistry. We derive pride from our work and feel a sense of joy, self-esteem, and purpose. This is something that happens within the dentist's head and heart, and they often balance out. If the good feelings from practice start to fade and the head and heart get out of balance, that's a signal. One dentist told me, I just knew it was time to retire. Negative psychological reasons may be gradual loss of joy or purpose and wanting to retire from dentistry. Practice management issues such as staff, regulatory mandates, insurance restrictions can slowly sap the joy of practice. Positive intrinsic reasons for retiring to something can include a new passion or discovery that provides more joy or purpose than is received from dentistry. And this could include a new way of practicing, such as being an independent contractor or volunteering, teaching, consulting, or teledentistry. And most of us have bucket lists, things we can't wait to do. Travel and honey-do lists, projects around the house can be wonderful things to pursue for about 2 to 5 years. But again, we need to realize that our retirement may last up to 30 years. When you think about it, our lives are divided into thirds. With the first third devoted to learning, we will learn from our parents values, we'll learn spelling and reading and writing in school, we'll go to college, we'll go to dental school and learn the skills of being a dentist, both the manual skills and the intellectual skills. And once we go to dental school, once we finish dental school, we start the second third of our lives, where we are building our families and our practice. We're developing networks of patients and colleagues. We're developing retirement funds. We're putting money away and developing our resources, powerful resources. And in the last third of our lives, we have all of those things from the first third that are still part of who we are. One thing that we haven't had up until the age of 60 or so, or when we're considering retirement, is discretionary time. When we take discretionary time and add it to this mixture of adequate retirement funds and knowledge and skills of dentistry that we've developed over our entire lives, with discretionary time, we can decide what we want to do. We have incredible potential for becoming all that we can be. We know what it's like to be younger. We've all been there, but we don't know what it's like to be older. Like it or not, we all age. Bucket list activities can be active or passive, which can influence when to retire. Active pursuits may require a young body, like climbing El Capitan. If you want to climb El Capitan, it's best to do it while you're relatively young. I experienced this perhaps 20, 30 years ago. I used to run at lunchtime. I'd run with a stopwatch and run 3 miles and kept a log of my times. I would have to be by a particular driveway or a tree by a specific time. And I found that it was getting harder and harder to maintain that speed. And I thought one day, Neil, wake up, smarten up. You're not going to get faster and faster as you get older. At some point, you're going to be getting slower. So put the stopwatch away, run for a different reason, run for the enjoyment. So I enjoyed the fall foliage and listened to the birds and the spring peepers, and found that running could be very relaxing and enjoyable. It wasn't the stress of keeping up with a stopwatch anymore. Other retirement activities are more passive, like cruising. You can sit on a cruise. There are a lot of people in wheelchairs that are on cruises, and some people even retired at cruises. They're comparable to retirement homes in terms of cost. So tailoring retirement planning to the ability to participate in those activities you want to pursue. And don't forget family. Many look forward to spending more time with family. Having financial security is obviously important, and many people use this as a target for retirement planning. But remember, having enough money isn't why a person should retire. You need a goal, a purpose, something meaningful to do. Also, a person without adequate retirement funds can retire to something else if that something else will generate enough income to replace what would be lost if not working. To add supplemental income to my retirement journey, I started a new business, Daily Dental Services, where I provided coverage for disabled dentists. Creating retirement sources of income can be important for perhaps expanding a hobby into a business. If a person loves to travel, one can become a travel agent and earn money while traveling. Be careful, though, with this idea of using retirement funds for starting a business. I'm an examiner for the Northeast Regional Board, which is now CDCA, and was talking to an oral surgeon from the South several years ago who was telling me very happily about the fried chicken restaurant that he was about to purchase. It was there were a lot of promises for great profits. The next year after when I was talking with him, he said it's just about to open, and he was ecstatic. He was going to make a boatload of money. Well, the third year, when he was telling me about it, he said it was a disaster. Seems that the employees that he has as an oral surgeon are not anywhere near this quality of person that work in a restaurant. He found that his employees had a very different work ethic. They would show up late or not show up at all, and they were stealing him blind. He was going to sell and close that restaurant. So if you're using retirement funds or starting a new business, be prepared to lose it, or be very confident that it's going to be a success. Because if you lose that money, it's going to be very difficult to get it back because you don't have the same amount of time for compounding. Another reason for when a person is retired is when their family needs you. It could be your parents are needing you, or even children. So you need to reevaluate your priorities. What are your priorities? Why are you wanting to retire? What are you going to be doing? If we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. We realize we don't have to work or not work. In dentistry, we can reduce our schedule to allow us to participate in some of those bucket list activities while we're still working. We can take longer vacations. We can have a long transition where fun activities get mixed in with work, creating that mint chocolate chip ice cream. When the quality of work starts to decline, it is often too late to have an ideal transition, and it is best to get out as soon as possible for the benefit of patients, staff, and practice value. When enjoyment starts to wane, it is likely to have a slow onset and will allow opportunity for reflection and reevaluation of purpose and goals. Try to find that enjoyment and find out where it has gone and what other options you have. There may be other things that you can be wanting to do. There may be the enjoyment might be because you're sick of managing, and so you'd want to perhaps sell and stay practicing. When finances allow, of course, a person needs to have adequate funds to retire. Although a person can also plan around having alternate sources of income to supplement what is lost from practice, one can still retire and have an enjoyable retirement. When there is something to retire to, one of the most common concerns, both before and after retiring, is that we hear all the time at the Association of Retiring Dentists is, what am I going to do? Another reason is when there is a family need. We need to be prepared to be caregivers as we age. It is very possible to have, for a 60-year-old, to have a 90-year-old parent. I've also talked to several dentists who retired when a spouse became ill. When there is a burning desire to do something different, this can be a powerful driving force for discovering new abilities and interests. When there is a new purpose, purpose is almost foundational to a meaningful retirement as well as a meaningful life. When we have good communication skills with those closest to us, we need to be on the same page. Without good communication skills, the best laid plans can fall apart. Sometimes spouses have very different ideas about what retirement will look like. One may have been staying home, taking care of the kids, and when the retirement question comes up, says, I'm going to go to work. I've been sitting home all these years, and I want to get out and do something and generate some income and have some fun, be out in the working world. In my case, why and when happened within just a few weeks of each other. Our office was closed for several weeks last spring because of COVID-19. And when it reopened, I went through the drills and fitting of the PPE, including the N95 mask. My vision and communication was impaired. Dentistry became physically tiring, less productive, and no longer fun. So while having coffee one morning in May, I drew up a list of reasons why I should retire and why I should continue to work. Retirement 1, 14-2. The answer to the next question, when, was now. So over the next 45 days, I finished up cases, wrote letters, and saw my last patient on June 30th of last year. COVID-19 gave me the why and the when. I was also prepared financially and psychologically, as it was my 24th year of transition. So here are some advice bullets. Ideally, plan your transition long before being ready to retire. The longer a person plans a transition, the more options that are available. Understand yourself and look to expand your joys and strengths into fun, productive transition and retirement activities. Don't retire just because you can. Retire because you have a big reason why. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Neil. That was a great presentation. I have found over the years of helping dentists transition that getting to that why and when is frequently the biggest barrier to being able to get out of practice. As Neil talked about, in his situation where he no longer was an owner of the practice, when you're not an owner, deciding when to quit dentistry is, once you've decided, it's fairly easy to get out of because you don't have that ownership issue to deal with. When you own a practice, you have something to deal with. And today I am going to go over the hows to get out of ownership. So if you currently own a practice, at some point you need to go from owning a practice to not owning a practice. Broadly speaking, your way of getting out of owning it's going to fall into one of these categories here. As you can tell by looking at it, the last three involve options where you don't actually sell the practice. Are these all viable options? Yes. Is it possible they're the best option? Possibly. That's a whole nother conversation on those three. For intents of this webinar today, I am going to go over the first, which is how to get out of it by selling your practice. So this is my perspective on selling, having done this for a few years now. Back when I got into my practice and I bought my practice in 1997, it was before banks would lend money to young broke dentists like myself. They would laugh at you. It was before corporations were around. For the most part, it was before PPOs were around. There were a couple people taking HMOs, but they were pretty rare. For the most part, it was fee for service. And on my own case of buying my practice, the owner of the practice carried a note for me, and that was pretty common back then. Coincidentally, the purchase price fell right at a nice even 65% of what he did for an annual gross, and that was common for the time frame. Through the next 20 years, I ran into some health problems and had to transition out earlier than I expected, and I went back to school. Got a bunch of training on how to do transitions, transitioned myself. And I can tell you in 2017, when I transitioned out of my own practice, things had changed a lot. And in the meantime, they have continued to change. And what I find a lot of times where people who don't plan well, they run into what Mark Twain talked about here. It ain't what you know that gets you, don't know that doesn't get you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So we are going to go hunt down a buyer for a dental practice. Dental buyers fall into roughly three different groups. The first group, the practicing dentist looking for ownership. If you're any other kind of business, they would refer to this as a private buyer. And meaning by a private buyer in general means somebody who's going to buy your business and run your business firsthand. Now, in most businesses of the world, let's say hypothetically, I wanted to buy a bakery. There's nothing most time that's going to prohibit me from buying that bakery and go baking myself. In a dental practice, necessity, if you're going to buy a dental practice and do the dentistry, you pretty much have to be a licensed dentist. So that very much lowers our pool of applicants with this. Most of the time with this, and I will go over the various types of dentists that will look into this as I have listed there. There are financial buyers, they've come into the picture, and there are strategic buyers. So, first thing I'm going to talk about is the young dentist. I know from talking to other dentists, this is by far the most common type of buyer people will talk about. This is what most people hope for. And not everybody, but I hear this a lot. Like I hope someday I get a young dentist in here and mentor them and have them buy my practice. All good. This is what I hear a lot. So let's talk some realities of these young dentists, a lot of which are different than when we were young dentists. Half these dentists, they do want to own a practice. Now, the converse of that is true. Half don't. This is, an ADA survey of right when they graduate. So obviously opinions can change a few years after graduation, but there's less of them looking in general to own a practice than there were when I got out of school.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Corey. We can't see
Yeah.
the presentation, and I just thought.
Oh, you can't see it?
No.
Can you see that?
Yes, we can see that.
All right.
There you go.
Okay. All right.
Wait.
So, sorry about that again. Where I left off here, most of these young dentists have a significant amount of student loan debt. I don't think that surprises anybody. By significant, I mean $250,000 or more. It's fairly common. They have a negative net worth. That's just a reality of their condition. Very, very few of these will have the cash available to write a check for your practice. I tell you all this, and you're sitting there going, oh, geez, these guys will never buy this. I'm telling you, banks will lend money to these guys and girls to buy a practice. There are healthcare bank lending realities. So when we're talking about the young dentist buying a practice from you, a reality is there's almost always a third party involved, and that is the bank. And the bank has their own expectations, and they have a say in this matter, or else they're not going to lend the money. Realities of these healthcare bankers, there are a lot of them. They are very competitive. They are willing to, what they expect out of these young dentists is a good credit score and a sufficient production history. They know they're going to have a lot of debt. They know they're not going to have a lot of collateral. They know their net worth's not going to be worth anything really. They are all right with that because they're lending on an income producing stream. What they won't lend on is bad math. And what do I mean by bad math? Let's go to the next one here. Let's look at, contrastly, let's look at what good math is. This is what the bankers want to see. They want to see, when they look at the numbers of that practice, there's enough gross revenue coming in to cover the operational expenses of that practice, the loan payment that they are now going to be giving out to buy the practice, and sufficient income to cover all the dentist's personal expenses and obligations. They expect, I have down there as a positive net income. This needs to be in the black and not the red. Bankers will not lend money on red equations. They really want to lend the money, but they are business people. They're not going to do it. I often get presented when I talk to dentists about this, and they'll bring up when they started, they didn't make hardly any money and they worked their way up. I did the same thing. We could have a lot of talk and debate on the merits of that. Maybe it's better, maybe it's not. The reality of it is we're not going to talk the bankers into this. The bankers, they don't want to go there because the bankers have learned the hard way that if it comes between that young dentist putting bread on the table and paying their practice loan, they might get a little behind on paying their practice loan. The bankers aren't going to put themselves in that position. And the other factor on this, when you look at this math of this, I will get, people will say, well, hey, yeah, I know the revenue is not where it is right now is what it is, but boy, it just used to be something else a little bit ago. That's true. And the banks will take that in consideration as far as merits and why they think it's a decent idea to loan to the prospective buyer. But the reality is the money has to make sense now. They won't lend the money on potential alone. They just won't. Associate buyout. First of all, you have to have an associate. That's obviously the first step. Grim reality of associate buyouts is, per the ADA, 75% of these things don't work out. They are a loser proposition mostly. My experience on working both ends of this on why it all comes down to poorly defined terms. There's a non or poorly defined when, non or poorly defined how, or non or poorly defined how much. Occasionally you have an associate that really never really intended to buy the thing in the first place. They just, they showed up there, said the right things, and 10 years later, they're still working away there. I get pushback on this from dentists, and I get it. You want to go out on your time, and you want to go out when you're ready. But vagaries are hard when you're young and you're trying to make a career and you're trying to go. Looking at from the other side of the fence, if it was my niece or nephew, I would be pretty insistent on them having either a defined when, how, or how much, or a defined formula on how that's figured out. And that Latin phrase there, ex perquo tu, is, proceed at your own risk. If you decide to do it the old way of just, it'll work out when it works out. I see a lot of difficulties with that. Partner buyout. First of all, you have to have a partner. Again, like the associate, many of the same issues as the associate. That partner needs to exist. Where I see problems necessarily with partner buyout, you have to be very mindful of what that practice is going to look like for your partner once they buy you out. And when I say this, it's circumstantial, that practice. Is your practice one that's growing crazy? Can you get dentist in there to replace you? If that's the case, this is a great scenario for your partner. I have seen the opposite, though. I've seen practices where they're in maybe a rural area and industries moved out and the like. And, realistically, to practice, once you leave, it's going to contract. That puts your partner in a hard spot to buy you out, because they're going to buy, even if it's contractually in there, they're going to buy you out and now have a smaller practice. It's a tough scenario with that. So obviously, if you have a partner, this is a high choice, but be mindful of that. All right, the financial buyer. Generally speaking, here, this is my definition of it. A financial buyer is somebody who intends to buy your practice without any intention of practicing dentistry there themselves. End of story. That's a financial buyer. Now, broadly speaking, I broke it down in 3 categories here we're going to go over. I'm going to loosely touch on them all, but they're all very similar, and I'll go over more of a generality between the 3 on the end of the last slide of the 3. So the first one I have is the DSO. We've all heard of the DSO. What is a DSO? Well, per the ADSO, which is the Association of Dental Support Organizations, they contract a dental practice to provide critical business management, allowing the dentist, paraphrasing here, allowing the dentist to do the clinical dentistry, and they'll take care of the business part. We've all heard the spiel. They loosely fall into 2 big categories. There are those that buy existing practices, Heartland being the biggest that we've heard of. There are those that do a scratch startup every place they go, Aspen being the largest of those. When I think of a DSO, I think of branding, systems, and organizational structure. They usually have a brand that they are promoting. I break this off to dentists on practice 2 for 30. You'll see these guys too. They are, they are literally trying to get a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th practice. Though they usually are much looser than a DSO, they're on the path to becoming a DSO. Again, they can't practice everywhere, so they need you to practice there. But that's what you're getting. And it is usually more personal because when you're on practice 3, you'll know all the dentists that are working for you pretty well. Private equity. I really am getting into some semantics here, getting difference between private equity and a DSO. Private equity groups, to me, the difference is very much the same. You have this fund that is looking to invest in a good business. When I think of something like a private equity in my head, when I say that versus a DSO, they have less of a complete dental focus than a DSO would. They really tend to leave you alone clinically. They believe the branding of whatever branding you have. In a lot of other ways, they function just like a DSO, though. They're going to want to take over the business systems like the accounting, ordering, what have you. So commonalities to expect for many of these private, financial buyers. They need somebody to do the dentistry besides themselves. And that almost certainly is going to be you for a while. The terms of how long and how much, the other catch is, how much money, how or will they pay you? The majority of these entities will not pay you all at once. They're going to pay you a lump sum at the beginning, and the rest will come either in another lump sum or over periods of time. The combination of how long they expect you to work for you and when they say they will give you the rest of the money has a lot to do with the circumstances of you and your practice and your practice's location, meaning how key do they see you to that practice? How replaceable are you? How long will it take them to replace you? How risky do they see the deal? These are all entities that these financial buyers take into consideration. Strategic buyer. This is basically a dentist down the street or across town or somewhere near you. They are looking, in a nutshell, to take aspects or all of your practice into their practice or vice versa. Maybe they don't have a great facility and they want to move their practice into your practice. These have always been done to an extent. These are picking up momentum. And my own opinion is these will continue to pick up momentum. Certain areas of the country, depending on where you are, the populations are contracting. If you're out in a rural area, these make a lot of sense in contracting populations. Also, you run aspects of just the cost of doing dentistry. As we know, every few years that go by, the equipment gets more expensive and there's more of it. And a lot of it could be shared by multiple dentists. I look for this to keep growing. Which type of buyer is best? There is no right answer for this. The best type of buyer for you is going to be the one that most fits into your equation of when, how much do you need to get, what does your work back conditions ideally look like to you? There are a lot of factors. Where's your practice located? There is no straight answer to this question. How much can you get for your practice? This is the one you guys are probably getting to this slide, and a lot of you, I know, I hope I'm give you a nice little 60 to 70% or something like that, or 70 to 80%. I have seen the 0 to over 100% annual gross. I have seen this whole range in the last 5 years. Some practices just won't sell. Some are worth a lot. Now, most are in between there, absolutely. But the days of every practice is worth 60 to 70% are long gone. You really need to talk to somebody who is aware of the market and can really assess the value of your practice. How long will selling your practice take place? This is a good question. If you have adequate help, meaning you got a good lawyer, you got a good transition consultant broker, somebody who knows how to do all this, from the time you have an identified buyer till closing, usually gonna be done within 90 days. It's a process. If you don't have somebody driving that train, no, they can derail pretty easily, but this can be done in 90 days. Finding that buyer, it depends. Again, I sound like a broken record, but it depends on your wishes. Where are you? How do you want to get this done? These can be extremely fast if it's the right situation. It can take a long time if we're really reaching for a unicorn of a buyer. Realize that's not so straightforward anymore. My recommendations: start planning early. Neil touched upon this. 5 years out is, to me, I would say that should be standard. Get qualified help. Talk to people that actually deal with this, not people that did this, sold their practice 15 years ago. That's great, but the market has changed a lot. And one of my biggest recommendations is come to peace with a realistic exit strategy. You'll be willing to change how your practice is to achieve the exit strategy you want. Those are choices you can make. As the sign says up here, I see, the path to happiness to me is that decisions. Thinking too long and uninformed opinions, they can derail you. Awesome. And thank you, everybody. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties I had there. But that's it. Let's see if we have any questions. I need to.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, they can go ahead and put it into the Q&A below.
I see one here. How and when should I get evaluation done? Again, 5 years out. If you're within 5 years, you really should consider getting one done. You need to go to somebody who knows how to do this. I know how to do this. Somebody like myself. But yeah, you need, again, tying into the whole thing, you need to know where you stand. The beauty of why we say 5 years out, 5 years out is enough time to plan, and it's enough time to change direction a little bit if you need to. When I have somebody come to me a year or two from when they want to retire, it doesn't leave a lot of time to change anything. You kind of are where you are. So it is a very good thing to do 5 years out. Oh, I got another question here. My cousin is a divorce attorney. He said he can take care of our contract. Should I do this? No. Let me just get that as a quick answer. Dental transactions are transition contracts are a very specialized niche of law. There are lawyers out there that do this every day, and they're very good at it. What will happen, and I get this. The gut instinct on this is I'm telling you this, you're thinking, boy, it's this specialized lawyer. He's going to cost me a fortune. Ironically, the reverse is actually true usually. And why I say this, the specialized lawyer doesn't have to reinvent the wheel every time he does this. They have it down. They do this all the time. They're very efficient. It's not crazy legal fees. Where we see things go crazy is when you hire your uncle who says, I can take care of this for you. Why? Because they don't know how to do this, and they spend weeks doing research to figure out how to do these contracts, right? And they end up billing them for you. So I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but please do not pick a non-dental lawyer for this, because not only that, they'll kill deals. So no is the answer to that.
I would like to sort of chime in on this.
Sure.
And that has to do with using professionals. When I first started looking at selling my practice, I thought, I can do this myself. And so I put an ad in the ADA Journal and waited for some responses. And one day I got some resumes coming in, and thought, okay, I'm going to, and this was during my coffee at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, okay, well, I'll wait until 9 o'clock to give this guy a call. This is a good looking resume. So I waited until 9 o'clock, and then just before calling, I thought, okay, well, I better check the area code. This was back when area codes really told you where the phone was located. And turns out I would have been calling this guy in Alaska at something like 4 or 5 in the morning. So I was realizing too that I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not a specialist in school systems, and I needed to let somebody else do that work. I'm a dentist, and there are people who know how to find candidates and how to answer their questions about real estate and schools in particular areas. So I very quickly let go and dealt with a broker because, again, I needed to do the dentistry and let the professionals do what they do and let them do it well. And I can focus on what I do. So using professionals, not only lawyers, but practice brokers is very important from my perspective.
Thanks, Neil. All right, I got a couple more questions here. What's the market like today? Buyer's market with lots of practice for sale. How about bank financing? Great questions. Let me start with the last part. The bank financing, it got, I don't want to say derailed, but it got kind of paused up during the COVID situation. It is coming back to normal again. Meaning by that, a year ago, a lot of the bankers were kind of froze up. They were skittish because they didn't, none of us knew what was going on. So we're almost like exactly a year ago from when it was like, oh, what's going on? Our practices were shut down. Who knows? So the banks were kind of like, who knows? They're coming back to normal. So they're lending again. It's post-recovery. Fortunately, as time is going on, it looks like we're operating back to normal again. That's good. And that's the way to look at it. The other parts of that question there, what's the market like today? The market is active. It is very dependent on where you are. There are areas where, there are, 10 prospective buyers for every person willing to sell. The reverse is also true. There are areas where there's 10 sellers for any person who's willing to buy. There's interesting geographical considerations with that. Again, this is part of the reason to start early is I know these things, I can't just sit there and say exactly for everybody, but I know my market well because I've been working it. I know what areas are selling. I know what areas struggle to sell. I don't expect everybody to know that. So that helps. I would talk to somebody about that. What's another part of that one? Lots of practice for sale. There are quite a bit of practices for sale. Yeah, I would say there's a lot of practice for sale. To me, there's a huge inventory. There are a lot of dentists between the age of 60 and 75. I expect the market at some point to really get flooded. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I think it will happen. I got another question here. Taxes, how much will I pay? What about the proposed increase in capital gains and income taxes coming down the pipe? That's a great question. I can tell you if the capital gains and income tax both go up, that is not a good thing for when you sell practice. I'm not an accountant, so I'm not going to give specifics on this, but again, much like the lawyer, we go to sell practice. Most people have a pretty good accountant, so this isn't a big issue. If you need them, we'll get you hooked up with one. Depending on how the sale goes, the allocations, it either goes into income or goes into capital gains. Currently, it's a much better scenario to have it as capital gains. That caps out, I think it's around 20%. Obviously income can go much higher. So the problem is, if these bills go through and capital gains tax spikes up, especially that one, even income tax goes up. Frankly, if you have a sale, let's say hypothetically, there are bills that go through at the end of this year. Okay, It's around December of 2021. It goes into effect early next year. The difference between you selling, you know, you could be staring down a 20% tax capital gains if you sell it by the end of the year. You wait 2 years from now, it could be, God knows what, 35, 40. I don't know. I think I saw 30, high 30s is what they're proposing. So it will absolutely make an impact on the net of your sale if those taxes go up. All right. Any other questions out there? Nope. Looks like we're good, Rose.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Neil. That was great. I appreciate that presentation. That was really good.
Thanks.